Good morning, community. Quick update on this episode. After we missed our recording day last week, we had a marathon podcast this week, so we decided to split it into 2 episodes. This one will cover Ayinde's topic, borrowed attention, and then part 2 will be the episode right after this one, which will cover my topic on content strategy. Feel free to listen to them back to back as they tie into each other a fair bit. As always, enjoy, and don't forget, it's good to relate. What do you want to talk about today, Ayinde?
I want to talk about borrowed attention and owned attention. As a little background to it, I was thinking about it over the last week because of, well, I may as well say it now, because of iShowSpeed. And I noticed a lot of things happening around that. So I thought, what are they doing? And are they doing it the right way? So that's why I want to talk about borrowed attention.
That had crossed my mind to talk about that too, but I think for the same reasons you're going to mention, there are a few reasons why I chose not to do it. I might still do it later on, but yeah, that iShowSpeed thing was a whole, coming to the Caribbean was a whole scene. So yeah.
What do you want to talk about today?
All right, so I have been really contemplating. I was juggling 3 different topics, and since we've been talking about content strategy so much in different ways, kind of referencing it, I didn't want to talk today about why content strategy should always start with who. I want to get into that a bit, and we might not have the time to go into the details of fully what that is, but at least we could get into some of the foundational things about why I think when you're developing a content strategy, you should always start with who.
Right. Okay, I'll be interested. I'm assuming the who right now, but I'm going to wait until they actually get into it to figure out who might be. Who the who might be.
Who the who might be.
Like a Dr. Seuss episode. All right.
Yes, leaning into that right now.
Yeah, so we all know iShowSpeed came to the Caribbean. I've known about iShowSpeed for years. He's been streaming since 2005, and that's probably as long. When did I first see an iShowSpeed video? I don't know. Maybe a long time ago. Maybe 2008. Definitely not my kind of content, just from a consumption point of view. But I think he's one of those YouTubers who started early enough and also became big enough that if you pay attention to any kind of content, you should know about them. People like him and Mr. Beast and so on, they have a certain following and a certain awareness in the market. He's famous for exaggerated reactions. I think that's what a lot of people know him for, especially in his early streaming days. But I think his content has matured a lot. And this is like a culmination of that maturity because he started doing stuff with football. He started doing stuff with sports. I saw him racing a couple of guys, and he seems to be pretty athletic in and of himself. So some of his content with real athletes, and real being inverted commas here, but professional athletes, I should say, that has kind of created a shift for him. And of course, his recent thing, live streaming travel. And I didn't know this, but I found out because of somebody who created content around the event. So Karen wrote a very good article on it. And we are not going to do what Karen Rose did. We're not going to analyze the entire campaign in any kind of way. He did a good job, and I would recommend you check that out. But what I learned from looking at that article is that this was actually a collaboration with Expedia, which I didn't realize, which is very interesting in and of itself. Yeah. Now, the thing that happens when a global phenomenon arrives, anything major happens, the natural inclination of brands and of content creators is to try to piggyback on that. And it's nothing new, it's nothing that hasn't happened before. And it's easy to get tempted to jump on the bandwagon. Yeah. I mean, in a very corporate sense, in a very real sense, businesses do it all the time. When you have Super Bowl, when you have World Cup, when you have the Olympics, sometimes they do it officially, sometimes they do it in a guerrilla marketing style. Nike is famous for that around World Cup. But everybody wants to kind of get on the bandwagon too, as the segment is about to borrow attention from this other thing. So let me give you a textbook definition for borrowed attention. I mean, as much as we're educating, right? So borrowed attention, often used interchangeably with borrowed interest, is a marketing and advertising technique where a brand, meaning your brand, intentionally associates itself with an unrelated person, event, image, or theme that already has strong consumer interest, attention, and engagement. Yeah. So the goal is to kind of capture that attention that already exists and usually transfer positive energy from that and positive attention and engagement from that event or person to your brand. Yeah. So you could kind of capture that. So that's what borrowed attention is. And that's what we see a lot of our content creators have been doing over the last week. Some have been doing it in a very effective way, some not so effective, some in a flat way. It makes no difference to their own platform in the way that is done. So any thoughts, Juma, before I move on?
Yeah, this saying borrowed attention is a big deal, and if you use it right, it works. If you don't, then it could be very, very bad. So there are different ways to approach it, and definitely with iShowSpeed in the Caribbean, lots of people have been benefiting from this borrowed attention, and also not benefiting. It has been both negative and positive for some people. So we'll see how it goes. Oh, and Karen Rose did the article in collaboration with Media Insight. I just wanted to mention that. So some of the data he collected was from Media Insight.
Right.
And we happen to, well, people know Media Insight is one of our clients. So
full disclosure.
Yeah. So big up Media Insight.
So that will explain the high level of detail in terms of the data that is included in that article. Yeah, so that's good. That's good. I have to go back and check out some of the data. It seems like the numbers are phenomenal. I saw something like 4.79 million streams for the Trinidad and Tobago episode. And I think over the Caribbean is excess of 30 million streams over the entire Caribbean. That's rough math. That's just glancing at it kind of math. I could be wrong. So good job from Media Insight.
Just to say, I think Karen may have done a few releases. He did one of those. I think the big one he did it with Media Insight. So he may have done a few releases about iShowSpeed.
Right. How long have you known about iShowSpeed yourself?
Long time. When he was very annoying. When he was barking at the screen and he did his music video. I said, what does this guy do? This is before he started IRL streaming and traveling and streaming, and so he's been around for a long time. If you've been on the internet, you've been on YouTube, you know him.
I knew him back when he used to lose his mind playing video games. Yeah, and that was the original draw. Like, let's go watch iShowSpeed play a video game, for when he loses, he's going to lose his mind. And that was the entertainment. Of course, that wouldn't be entertainment for me, but it definitely helped him build a following. And what I'm glad to see is evolution. I think sometimes people get famous for one thing or get really good at one thing, and it's difficult for them to make that shift and to take a risk because you're saying, well, I'm good at this and I know I'm good at this. But the evolution and the maturity, I think, is important. Even if some of your original followers no longer take part, you could kind of evolve your following and evolve your audience. And businesses, that applies to businesses also. Sometimes you have to evolve your target audience. Your core customers may need to evolve and develop to make sense inside of the current context. All right, so back to borrowed attention. What's some of the wrong ways to do borrowed attention? Now, I figure there might be a number of different wrong ways to do it. I'm going to talk about 3 different ways that I considered wrong. So borrowed attention is very useful, yeah, but you want to use it to create something that you own. So, there's borrowed attention, there's owned attention that your brand currently owns. I think one of the easiest things to do is to just repost content around iShowSpeed, but it's also one of the least effective things to do. So just reposting stuff that is already out there. So creators who repost clips from him or from other people without adding any other value, they're not actually borrowing attention. You just share what you're doing is helping his algorithm and helping Expedia's algorithm, as opposed to doing anything for your own platform. So that might be my first problem. Just being lazy about it. Lazy might be a harsh word because I know it does take a lot of time to create content, but just reposting and adding no value. And that's one of the golden rules of content, right? Add value. You must add value. So that's one.
I would add to that, Ayinde, that
go ahead.
Also the platforms don't like it. They don't like when you do that. They're actually cracking down on people who reaction content is in the crosshairs because they don't really, some people just sit in the corner and don't say anything, which does not add any value. So they're looking for original content that adds value. And part of that is if you say something, you analyze. There are different ways to do it, but I agree with what you're saying. If you don't add anything, the platforms don't like that too, and they're actively cracking down on that right now.
Yeah, it's such a strange phenomenon. I mean, some people can do reaction videos. Like, I think the way it started had some value to it. Like, to see what the ones I particularly liked were younger people listening to like old hip hop and doing reactions to that. That had some value to me because it's interesting to see how younger people interpret what we might have thought as, yeah, that's a real good song. And then to hear younger people critique it or really fall in love with it, that had some value. So that's a type of reaction video, but it adds value. As opposed to, as you say, you just have a little photos. Sometimes you just have a video or photo at the bottom. Sometimes they have nothing and you're just reposting content. That's not going to help you. It's not going to help your brand. It's not going to help your attention levels in any way. Yeah. What's the second major problem, I think? I think this one, listen, if this one fall in your garden, don't pick it up. But trying too hard. And this is for brands who want to be down. So there was a R&B song back in the days. I think it's Aaliyah, I Want to Be Down. So people from that era will know what I mean by I want to be down. The younger people might know it.
It was Brandy.
Brandy?
Yeah, it was Brandy.
Oh, yes, it's Brandy. Yeah. Sorry, Brandy. Yeah, it was Brandy. Younger people might call it aura famine. Still not sure if I'm using that correctly. But my generation will call it Fallon. Yeah. When last you hear that term, Juma?
A long time we used to call people Falcons. Yeah, Falcon or what? So yeah, Fallon.
Yeah,
fighting friends.
Fighting a line. I don't know if that is the correct acronym, but that's what it evolved to. So you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be a Falcon. So in other words, you don't want to seem as though you're trying too hard. This is like the old man wearing the young people style. You're getting involved in it, but you're doing it in a way that you're trying to connect with Gen Z, but not from your perspective. But you're trying to go. I don't want to say go down, but you want to go to their level, as opposed to being authentic and true to who you are, and you just end up looking weird, and you just end up like, what's going on here? And sometimes it's very obvious that you don't understand, which some people actually came out saying, well, why this iShowSpeed guy, this and that and the third, and so much attention and people running down the street, and you're complaining about it. Well, what your demonstration is a lack of understanding of a particular part of the culture that you've now moved on from. And there's always going to be that. When I was young, there were things that I was doing that people, even just slightly older than me, would be like, what is that about? Because that's the way culture works. First of all, you don't even understand some of the lingo. So if you don't understand the language, it's hard to get into the culture. Language plays a big part in shaping culture and how culture travels among different groups. And so you're not part of the group, so you're not getting it. And that's fine. You don't have to get it. But what you don't want to do is to try too hard because it's popular and because you tell yourself, well, I need to get some attention. Let me just kind of force my way into the young people party, so to speak. There's a way to do it, and trying too hard is not one of those ways. Yeah. I see you thinking some thoughts there, Juma.
No, it's just remembering there's this little cartoon, this little comic strip, particularly for brands. Brands are in massive danger of that. Now, there are other people that could happen too as well. But when a brand adopts a trend or tries to jump on borrowed attention and they don't do it, especially if it's not related to the industry that they're in, people just see it as an attention grab and they'll reject it in their hearts. So there's this little comic strip where these people are they're wearing a pineapple on their head, and then there's a group of individuals and everybody starts to wear pineapples, and then all of a sudden a brand comes in and the brand says, oh yeah, the brand puts on the pineapple and then everybody looks disgusted and walks away, and then all that's left is brands just wearing pineapples on their head, and everybody who started the trend walks away. And so I think that's a good representation of what happens with this.
Yeah, I remember that cartoon. That's a very good commentary on how, I think the title of it was "Brand Spoil Everything." Somehow that comes to
exactly that. I think it's exactly that.
Yeah. So, and that kind of speaks to the need for authenticity too. So, I was listening to not Simon Sinek, Yellow Glasses Frame. What's his name again?
Oh, you know, I had his name in my head until they said Yellow Glasses Frame. Oh my goodness, why are you doing that to me?
Yeah.
Marketing.
Because he doesn't want somebody come who might be feeling sick or who might be feeling depressed, and they come and they express that in the workplace, or they express that in the way they were dealing with you. And he's not wrong. I don't think he's wrong, but it's interesting the way he looked at authenticity. Whereas the way I am thinking about authenticity is being authentic to your values and authentic to your brand. And I think brands need to continue to be consistent with that, especially in a space where there are trends and there are things that go viral and there are a lot of things happening, and you're trying to capture attention, especially some legacy brands who may not feel as though they get it just yet. They're not too sure how to create content. They're not too sure how to use content, and they're just kind of looking at what's popular on the different platforms. So whatever is popular on Instagram, whatever is popular on TikTok, and you can kind of lose yourself. Yeah. You kind of lose yourself, and you end up trying too hard, and you come across inauthentic. And the younger generation are very sensitive to that for various reasons. Has a lot to do with the culture and the way they were raised and the different things, and the over exposure to advertising. So they've become a little bit jaded towards brands. So back in our days, Michael Jordan on a Wheaties box was, nobody cared. That was like good marketing. That's good brand association. If you try to put somebody like Michael Jordan on a Wheaties box right now, it wouldn't work. Because first of all, Michael Jordan probably doesn't eat Wheaties in the morning for his breakfast. He probably has a very strict regimen being a professional athlete. And we know that. And so there's a certain level of inauthenticity that comes across with being ham-fisted with your content.
The person you were looking for is Seth Godin.
Seth Godin, that's the name. That's definitely, yeah. So,
and I would add to what you said just now real quickly that an example of that is recently what happened to Nike, where Nike was doing some advertising, I think for the Berlin Marathon or the marathon where this guy broke the 2-hour sub 2 hour. They had a billboard that said, "Runners welcome, walkers tolerated," and people went up in arms about that. They rolled it back, basically, which they weren't supposed to do, because that's what their brand is.
Yeah.
That's what their brand is, and they walked it back. And that was very disappointing for me personally, that the mob was able to get Nike to walk that back, but that was completely in alignment with the Nike brand. And the last thing I would add is that I didn't know this, but I didn't know that Kellogg's, the company, was sold to an Italian company, that basically they lost all this market capital and they were basically not going bankrupt, but they were like a shell of them former selves, a cereal, and they had to sell to a foreign company. I didn't know that. That's just a little tidbit.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. All right, let me move on to the third wrong way to do it. So I'm just going to do 3 today. So far we've done just reposting, trying too hard. And this one in itself might be controversial, but using negativity or using controversy or hot takes that usually lead to insulting some part of the culture or insulting the content creator, but basically going as an antagonist towards whatever is the prevailing thing. And the example that comes to mind is Travel with Zoe. Now, I'm not saying this is what she did because I didn't call her up to get her soundbite to figure out that this is what she did, but I'm using it as an example nevertheless. Everybody, well, that I was listening to kind of was in support of what was happening with iShowSpeed. Some people were critical of how people behaved because they didn't understand why these young boys were running on speed. Some people were critical as to who we introduced them to. But overall, everybody was positive. Zoe was one of the ones that stand out on her channel as being negative. Now, technically, she could have deliberately done this for the attention that she's now getting. Because I would argue that just behind iShowSpeed, the second most talked about thing, apart from the actual tour, is Zoe's reaction to the actual tour. So I would say that's a kind of a wrong way to get borrowed attention. It kind of turns your brand, or if you're an influencer yourself, it kind of turns you into a villain. And yes, you get a lot of attention, but do you get the right attention? And do you end up turning off the market? Because remember, all of these things are built around certain markets. So the market you are trying to talk to might get turned off. Yeah. So her market technically is the market for that whole Caribbean tour. Now, is what you're saying going to resonate with them, or is it just controversy for controversy's sake? And therefore you get a lot of attention in short term, but long term you damage your brand, and long term you mess with the relationships that you've tried to build over the time. Because her target audience is the Caribbean. We know that. And is using negativity going to actually benefit you long term, or is just going to give you a short term? Or right now her numbers are probably up because people go in to look for the video, people go in to look for comments, people go in to comment. So her numbers are up. But long term, what's the impact of that? So I would say those are my 3 wrong ways to borrow attention. Yeah. Any comments on the last one, using negativity? Any thoughts?
Yeah, that can really backfire. It depends on your own brand. Zoe's brand generally, but she's done controversial things in the past for attention. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that qualifies. And I don't know. I'm not sure if her take was genuine. I couldn't tell. Right. Or if she was just using it. I couldn't tell. So because I don't know her content that well. I've just seen her in passing. So she's getting the attention she wanted from it. She couldn't do a thing like what Karen Rose did or analyze anything. So she just shared her opinion and she made it about a hot button topic. And of course, it blew up. Everybody had. So she did what she was supposed to do, which was polarize people. Whether that's going to pan out long term for her, I don't know. But It is what it is.
All right. So let's kind of shift gears. How many minutes are we in? Okay, good. So let's shift gears to what's the right way to borrow attention. I'm going to just give 4 suggestions or ways that I suggest brands and businesses can borrow attention. One of them is the most obvious, and it is the same thing that's going on with iShowSpeed and Expedia, which is official partnerships. If there's somebody or some brand or some company or some individual that has the attention of the target audience that you want, one of the ways to talk to that audience is to do an official partnership. It can be as traditional as a sponsorship deal, what we used to call a sponsorship deal, which is Patrick Ewing, and they make a sneakers and they call it the Ewing. That's a weird one to pull out, right? Anybody ever had a Patrick Ewing?
That's a real throwback. But strangely enough, I had a Patrick Ewing sneaker in my cart for the longest while.
Oh, those were nice.
Yeah, I was just going to buy it for the retro vibes, but I couldn't justify it. Anyway, go ahead.
So yeah, it could take that shape, or it could be more collaborative. So brands now try to be a little bit more collaborative, and it goes back to that authenticity issue. So what Expedia has done with iShowSpeed, rather than just saying he is the official ambassador of the Expedia brand, is like, how can we collaborate to create content that benefits both platforms and reaches the audience that we're going after? Yeah, so you could do official partnerships in different varieties, in different levels of engagement. You could do these official partnerships. Some might be just a one-off video partnership, like I've seen with content creators. So sometimes I've seen MKBHD do one with Snazzy Labs, for example. So they might do a one-off video, or you could do something that's much longer term that puts the two brands in a more continuous proximity. So official partnerships, you come together, you agree, and everybody know this is an official partnership. That's one way to borrow attention. So you could borrow attention from that content creator, that brand, that celebrity. Another way that I would suggest is when you want to borrow attention from some other content, be very clear what value you're adding and how you're adding the value, and don't just piggyback. And I think the good example of that is Karen Rose's article along with Media Insight. It didn't just say, oh, iShowSpeed came to Trinidad, is real popular and people were running on the street, and you show the photos and you're just in the hype cycle. What it did was talk about its value for Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean. It also showed the numbers. So you can see it's not just hype. We could back this up with numbers. So it took a very critical and analytical look at the entire episode. So it's adding value. And a big part of that is adding value in the stream of your own content creation. So not just adding value in another way. So not just being entertaining, for example, because that may not necessarily have been your content stream all along, but staying within your content stream. And so when Karen looked at it, he would have created content very similar to content he's created in the past. So he's adding value and not just piggybacking off of what is already there. Yeah. Anything you want to add to that?
No, that's perfect. So it's the opposite to what you first mentioned, what not to do, which is to, instead of not adding value, you add value. You take the data, which essentially, when something happens, is information, is data, and then you customize the data to mean something, and that way you add value, as opposed to just taking it wholesale and just putting it somewhere else.
Right. My third right way, or third thing to keep in mind when you want to borrow content, is remember who your target audience is. And hopefully that's a good segue for Juma's content. But remembering who your target audience is very important. So you don't want to piggyback on a trend. You don't want to piggyback on a viral moment, and your target audience is not interested. So it relates to the previous point. If you create value, you have to create value that relates to your particular target audience and not just the general audience, because that's not what you're interested in. So that will already begin to give you some guardrails to keep you on a path and to think about the kind of content that you want to create around this particular viral moment. Yeah. So remember who your target audience is. And the last one is remember who you are. So stay on brand, 100% stay on brand and stay consistent with your content.
Excellent. Good.
I talked about who they're remembering, who your target audience is. So let's use that as a segue into what you wanted to talk about in terms of who.
Right. All right, so that was a good idea. I like that. Borrowed attention. I definitely was attempting to not talk about iShowSpeed this week.
Right.
But you did, which was probably a good thing. And the topic, the angle it took was great. This is the end of part 1 of this podcast on borrowed attention. Part 2 should be the next episode in line, and that one will be on content strategy. See you soon in part 2.